Welcome back to another episode of On Scene with RCSO. Today we have Lieutenant Lucas Grant in the house with us.
That's right. That's right. I appreciate you having me. Just filling in a little bit here for Lieutenant Lee, who has other obligations today out with the sheriff's office. But while I'm here, I want to make it exciting, like always. So we're going to talk about the zone report. And with the zone report, we want to make sure that we go into the 9 p.m. routine. With the 9 p.m. routine, make sure that you're locking your vehicles, your homes, so that way that you don't become a victim to a senseless crime.
Also, we want to make sure that we're putting it out there. We have our upcoming Citizens Firearm Safety class be held at our RCSO training range. That'll be on Saturday, October 21st from 8 p.m. to 5 p.m. If you're interested in participating in this event, you can always reach out to our Community Service Division at 706-261-0436, and we'll be able to get you the information that you need.
Absolutely. And it's a very fun class to be a part of. It teaches you a lot, especially for the ones who own firearms. If you've never used it, please come be a part of this class so that we can help you become more knowledgeable about that firearm.
Also, in the second segment of today's show, we'll have the Honorable Judge Kelli Spencer presiding over Juvenile Court. If you have any questions for her, please like, share, add your comments below on our page, and we'll make sure that we get you answers.
So stay tuned, because that's going to be a treat.
Today we have the Honorable Judge Kelli Spencer here with DJJ. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here with y'all today.
Well, if you can just kind of tell us about your role within DJJ, just so they can have a little bit more information about what you specifically do.
Certainly. So as one of the judges in the juvenile court, we work with DJJ pretty extensively, primarily when a child comes in front of us and that child has been adjudicated delinquent of a criminal or delinquent offense. That child will, in most cases, be sentenced to probation. And in those instances, what we're looking to do is to make sure we put some services in place. Because one thing that I want people to appreciate is we're looking to rehabilitate young people. Mm-hmm. We're not looking to punish young people. And so we're very much program and service driven in our juvenile court, and making sure that we can put things in place that will help to address the behaviors that cause that child to come before us in the first place. And so we will work with DJJ to make sure that we have programs in place, that we have services in place, and that the child is being properly monitored to make sure that they are doing everything that they've been asked to do.
What are some of the cases that you are seeing before you? Like, how long have you been there, first of all?
Well, I like to say I'm still a new-ish judge, because I was brought in 2020. I was officially sworn in December of 2019, and I took the bench in January of 2020. And we handle a variety of cases in our juvenile court. We do our traffic offenses, so any young person under the age of 17 who maybe has like a speeding ticket, they ran a light, something of that nature, we handle those. We also have our CHINS children, and those are children in need of services. And so that can be a young person who has committed what we call a status offense. Mm-hmm. So it's something where, for example, you have run away from home. You've been gone for 24 hours or longer without your parents' permission. You're being habitually disobedient, meaning you're not complying with your parents' household rules. These are things that wouldn't be offenses for any of us because we're adults, but for children they are, so they're status offenses. If a child is truant from school, meaning they have 10 or more unexcused absences from school, then that child can come in front of us under a CHINS. We also handle our delinquency matter, which I think most people are probably the most familiar about with the juvenile court. And of course, that is a young person who's committed a delinquent offense. And then finally, we also handle dependency actions, and those are instances where we may have to get defects involved because a child's home environment maybe is not the safest, and there are concerns that child is being abused or neglected, or in some instances even has been abandoned by their parent or their guardian. And so we look to bring those cases in so that we can make sure that child will be safe.
And as a follow-up to that, a lot of times when we have juveniles that have offended or they've committed some type of crime, a lot of times you hear, well, what are they doing to the parents? What's the accountability for the parents? What does juvenile court in relation to a parent being held accountable for their child's actions? What do you do with those type of cases?
I'm so glad you asked, because we get that a lot, where people want to know, what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? And so generally, we do want to hold the parent accountable. In a lot of instances, we'll put what we call a protective order in place if there's any concerns that the parent is not going to comply. Because when you're dealing with children, most of them can't drive. So they're going to be dependent on that parent to make sure that they get to appointments, that they get to their programs, they get to their services. And without having that full support, that full commitment from the parent, then the child's not going to be successful. And unfortunately, we have had a lot of instances where parents have interfered. And in those cases where we have that protective order, they're now under our jurisdiction, where we can now say, you know what, we've given you an opportunity to comply, to make sure that your child gets to this program, gets to this appointment, gets to this service, and you have failed to do so. So now we're going to go ahead and look to hold you in contempt, and we can actually lock up a parent. Now, what I will say is that's, I guess, a last avenue, because you have to think of all of the levels that are involved in detaining a parent. In many of our cases, we may only have one parent involved. And so if I'm locking up a parent, all of a sudden I'm putting that parent in jail, and I have these children at home without a parent in the home with them.
Right.
And that potentially now creates a defect situation where I'm having to contact defects if I cannot find someone who can take these children and be responsible for them while this parent is detained. We also have a lot of parents who are in jobs where they can easily be replaced. So you don't show up to work 2 days in a row, that's it.
Right.
You're fired. I don't want to make somebody's situation worse by trying to just get them to comply and do what needs to be done. I feel like a lot of times there's other ways we can get to the same end, which is ultimately just to make sure that that child is doing what needs to be done without having to lock up the parent. But something we've also looked to implement, because sometimes it may be a situation where a parent just doesn't know. They just don't know better. And so what we do is we also have a parent academy that we operate. It's a court-sponsored program under our Thrive program, and it allows a parent to participate in parenting classes. And it helps them to address a lot of, I guess, even modern issues that maybe other parents didn't have to deal with back in the day. But it gives you tips, pointers, everything you need to know to try to address some of the issues that your young person will be facing, and to help you be a stronger, more confident parent.
Now, is that program only open to parents that have a child that may already be in dealing with DJJ, or is this something that, you know, a parent that's having these issues? I know years ago I worked at 911, and in the morning times we would get abundance of 911 calls with parents saying, I'm not going to jail for my child, he won't get up and go to school, I need an officer to come to my house. And then years later I worked at the Board of Education Police, and a lot of times we had parents that would be coming down there because their child was being suspended for not coming to school, and they were seeking that help before that child even got that DJJ referral. They wanted those services put in place. They wanted to know what services were available to them before they were the ones having the police knocking at their door, having someone summoning them to court because their child was just not listening, or what we would call unruly juvenile.
Exactly. And we hear those cases too, because you do have some parents who are actually really trying.
Yes.
And there's some parents that have been trying for years and they have not seen the outcomes that they want. On the other hand, we have some parents who pretty much, I hate to say it, have kind of been absent. And so you now have a 13, 14, 15-year-old child who has not had a involved parent, and then that parent doesn't understand or appreciate why we're now having behavior issues from their child.
Right.
But children generally, at least in my experience, I see children want their parents to be involved. You know, it shows that the parent cares if you're asking questions. The child may be annoyed in the moment that you're asking them all these questions, but at the end of the day, it shows that that parent loves them, they care about them, they're concerned because they're asking them questions, they're involved in their lives. And so we're just trying to make sure that, yes, we do hold parents accountable, but that they also appreciate that once there is court involvement, you can't expect to see changes overnight.
Right.
Because, you know, you've had your child for, 12, 13, 14 years. give us a little bit of time to try to work and see if something will happen. Because we do have a lot of parents who say, well, this didn't work. And I was like, we've only been working with your child for 2 weeks. Give us a little bit of time to get something in place, and then appreciate the progress. Because again, we may not go from a 0 to a 10, but if we can go from a 0 to a 4, that's improvement. And I'm going to take that improvement, and then we can go from that 4 to maybe a 6. And over time, we may get exactly to where we want to go, but just be patient with the process, try the process. If something's not working, we can always change course and go a different direction and try to find something that will work. But not doing anything at all is not going to change the outcome.
Especially when a lot of those kids, they haven't had that stability, or they haven't been held accountable until they get into the courts. And then you have a parent that if they're truly trying to hold them accountable, they're like, wait, you didn't do this a year ago. You weren't doing this 6 months ago. So now they have to get that buy-in from their own child now.
Exactly.
How receptive are you seeing the parents in this Thrive program?
I will say generally, I think we're having a lot of really good support from the parents. I mean, some of them initially may say, hey, this is an added thing. I'm not the reason we're here. We're here because of what my child did. I have a job, I have responsibilities, I have other kids at home. But once we can get them to see the benefit, I think that most of our parents appreciate it, and they're in a better place once they have completed the program. And I will say with all of our Thrive programs that we provide, generally the court is providing transportation to almost all of those young people who participate. Okay. The parents, when they come for the parent academies in the evening, so we're trying to have some flexibility where we do it after work hours. You can come, you get a meal, a dinner. Your child can be there doing their programs and services while you're getting your parenting classes as part of the academy, and then we can send you home. You've had your dinner, you've been fed with your with the words, and then we can send you on your way. So.
And I was talking to someone earlier before we started, and they were talking about just the kids. They are going to school. And he was like, a lot of the times they're doing well in school, or at least they're going to school. But it's when they get home, there's a breakdown between the home life and the school life. And that's kind of where they're seeing things. Because the parents may not have the resources, or, they're trying as hard as they can, but they don't have somebody to provide transportation, or they don't get that meal. So their basic needs aren't getting met at home. So maybe that's where sometimes the breakdown is, and then they're getting into trouble because they're out while parent is trying to work, because maybe they don't have that great job where they can work when the kid is in school. So now they're kind of like hanging out and getting into trouble, probably because somebody else is getting into trouble,
and they don't have that supervision during that time. Like I know there are a lot of programs that are offered, like after school. I know Boys and Girls Club. They feed them, provide transportation, and getting them home. But a lot of times what I've seen, and especially dealing with the Board of Education, is that, that time when they're leaving, catching the bus or walking home, however they're getting home from school, to when they get home, that's when a lot of their incidents are taking place, or between that 8 o'clock, right around 8 o'clock, because that's what Boys and Girls Club and some of the other after-school providers, they've extended their hours out. Because they knew that was what that time period was, making sure that they can get those kids fed and get them directly home, because that's when a lot of their offenses are taking place.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, any young person that comes in my court is probably going to get tired of hearing it, but I love to ask, what do you do after school? What extracurricular activities are you involved in? What hobbies do you have? I think that's a key thing that we're missing for a lot of our kids, because while we have programs like the Boys and Girls Club, which are great, we still have a lot of kids who aren't able to participate in those programs. And those kids that don't participate, they go home, they get on social media. A lot of times, because you do have a working parent, there's no adult supervision. And we're finding that those kids generally are the ones who are going to find something else
to do.
And it's usually not something good if they're having to now come to court to see me. And so we're just trying to find, as many opportunities as we can to get children involved in programs, get the community involved, because I know there's a lot of people who have that desire. They just don't know what to do to come in and help kids, but that's what we're really missing. I know a few years ago I had a colleague who had a teenage daughter, and she also had a little boy who was elementary school age. We had no problems finding programs for her elementary age son, but the teenager, there was like nothing unless you just had vast resources. And so what we're missing a target population with our teens, because there's just not a whole lot of programs for them. And then we have to make it be a program that's going to encourage them, because obviously they have a different interest level than we do.
Yes.
And so we have to make sure that we cater some of these programs to their interests so that they will want to participate.
You got to get that buy-in.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's one of the things. We did have a special back to school special, and in there we talked to one of our explorers, because we do have an explorers program here that kind of targets that age, and he's been participating in it. He's a corporal. And he'll be graduating from that, and that's good. But we need, like you said, more of those programs. And when I was talking to someone else, and I was trying to figure out why is that, especially over the summer. But then I remember, you have a 14-year-old that can cook. At least they can do noodles. They can stay home. They
can do more than I can.
Yeah. They can stay at home by themselves. So you really don't have to. I mean, you need to, but you really don't have to supervise them like you do the little kids. And I think that's one of the reasons. Or they can,
but they
a
need
little
the
older.
enrichment still,
They do.
and they need.
They
I
do.
think, especially for young people now, with social media being as big of a thing as it is, like it wasn't a thing when we were that age.
Right.
I don't even think I had a cell phone until I was in college. But nevertheless, it's a whole new thing. And so they still need to have that ability to engage socially, learn how to interact with people, because I do get concerned that sometimes young people are so focused on the social media, they can't carry on a conversation with somebody sitting right in front of them because they're invested in, let me post this, let me post this.
And I think that's a conversation we've had about, if you talk to a lot of the teenagers now, they have no social skills.
Yes.
You can put a room full of teenagers, put them all in there, and you're going to see that they're all in there on their phones. Even
It'll
if
be
they're just
quiet.
forwarding, if they're texting each
Maybe
other.
somebody right across from them. Yes.
And
They
they'll
will
look
not
at them
engage
for their
you.
reaction and texting. Yes.
So I always want to see, even, like you said, the older kids, for the most part, can kind of do a little bit on their own, but they need that social engagement. I think they need to feel like they're part of something. Whether you're on a team, whether you're part of like a drama troupe, whether you're part of a choir, but something where you feel a part of something, and you can work towards a similar goal, and you can feel a sense of achievement once you've reached that goal. And a lot of our young people who are not able to participate in some of these programs, they miss out on all of that.
How do you think we can get them toward some of these, because they're out there, and like you said, the resources, it's not even really the resources, it's getting the information to them. Because when an incident happened, just like the Josie school shooting that happened, I saw a lot of programs or people I'd never seen before or heard from before, and I'm like, I didn't know that was there. So there has to be like some kind of coming together to build a resource list so when they call law enforcement, we can give them, we do it with homeless resources and things like that, so that we can say, look, here's some resources. Here is, they're interested in art. Look, here's something for art. They like music. Here's something for that. What's kind of your suggestion, or how before they get to you? Because it sounds like your programs, you have to be within the system.
Well, we do have a few exceptions.
Okay.
So we work with some of our young people, what we call informally.
Okay.
So that may be a situation where, like I mentioned Chen's earlier, where you have a child who's maybe not following the rules at home. They're starting to have some behavior issues. So it hasn't necessarily rose to the level where it is a delinquent matter, but we're starting to identify, there's some behavior issues and they need to be addressed. So in those circumstances, a parent may bring it to law enforcement's attention or something. They may call because my child won't go to school, they're acting up. And so that kind of puts it on our radar. And I will say that the sheriff's office has done a good job as far as knowing to contact us too, because they are aware of some of our programs as well. And so once that child has been identified, whether it's through the sheriff's office, whether it's through a parent who maybe speaks to a teacher or a guidance counselor at their child's school, and they reference them to the court, we can work informally with that child, and we can still provide a lot of the same services that we have in place for the children once they do become court involved. But our goal is to work with them informally. As long as they continue to be compliant and they're doing everything, they'll stay informal. So they won't have like a formal petition that is drafted up bringing them into the juvenile court system. And then once we see progress and we can release them, then, we feel like we've accomplished our goal. Obviously, in some instances, we have a child that maybe isn't receptive to the program. Maybe the parent's not receptive, and so we're not seeing the type of outcomes we would want. And so in that case, a formal petition could then be drafted up either on the CHIN's end or on the delinquency end, depending on what the behaviors were. And then at that point, that child will formally come into court, but we'll still be looking to pretty much offer very similar services. But now we have that extra level of accountability because you're under a court order, and if you don't comply with the court order, it gives us the ability to take a lot of other actions that we couldn't when it was just an informal matter.
So that CHIN's really just, it's like that, the entry level into trying to get them that help that they need. And I just became familiar with CHIN's within the last year because I started seeing the CHIN's apprehension orders. Are those like how it escalates into?
Pretty much, because what we have some that maybe start informally where there's not a formal petition written up, but where there is a formal petition written up, the general idea with CHIN's is to try to identify the behaviors, address the behaviors, and hopefully improve the behaviors so that it does not now escalate to where this child is having a delinquency matter. The goal generally with CHIN's is to try to keep kids out of, the detention centers, is to try to find alternatives to address concerning behaviors. And in most instances we are, but obviously, every child is not the same, and you have some children where you will try here and you'll progressively increase it until at some point you may have to take a more drastic action, which could include them having to spend some time there.
So when the Josie shooting happened, we got a lot of questions about from the media and some other outside sources about just charging juveniles. And I know you said some like delinquency and status offenses and things like that, and trying to just convey to people like it's a little different, depending on the charges and stuff. Could you kind of explain to people, because I know the one from the Josie shooting, he was charged with aggravated assault. People, well, why didn't he charge, what he did? He should have been charged as an adult. And I'm trying to explain, like, that's not an adult offense. Can you kind of explain, like, the age when children are considered an adult, or what brings them into, like, adult, or I used to call it big boy court. Yes. And what's the age can you charge? I know when I worked at the CAC, we talked about that briefly. We had some children who were just right there at 11, 12 years old that were committing sexual offenses. And they were some of our CHIN's kids, and we couldn't charge them with any type of criminal crime. Because of their age. So could you kind of explain just the age thing so people can kind of understand that?
Absolutely.
It kind of gets convoluted when it comes to 16, 17, 18. I got to go to school. No, I don't have to go to school. And it confuses the parents too. So
absolutely. Well, when it comes to like delinquent, and you keep hearing me use the word delinquent versus criminal, because when we're dealing with children, we refer to them as being delinquent. We never want to refer to a child as being a criminal or committing a crime.
Right.
That being said, there are instances where a person who's defined as a child could be charged with an adult offense. That could be it. Pretty much, we take children who are under the age of 16 at the time the alleged incident occurred. If they are 17 or older, then they're going to go to adult court, even if it's something as minor as like a shoplifting. But that 17 would be that threshold. Now, you could potentially have a child who is under 17 and is still charged as an adult, but that would be based on the nature of the offense itself. Obviously, anytime any young person has a gun in their possession is always a concern for this court, because we appreciate that in the wrong hands, a gun can be extremely dangerous. And we have witnessed in our own community what does happen when our young people have these guns in their possession. So we take it seriously, but we also are limited to what the law prescribes. And as much as we want to say, let's do this, we have to follow the law. And we have to follow the law for this child, just like we have to follow the law for that child. And as serious as the allegations may be against the child, we can't let our emotions get the best of us and try to take a drastic action that the law does not permit us to do. And so we don't decide the charges either as judges.
Right.
Once the child comes in front of us, those charges have already been decided by the prosecuting agency. And so once we have that, then that's kind of what we have. Now, there are instances where a matter could originate in juvenile court, and then the prosecuting agency, they can make the decision to say, you know what, we've looked more in depth at the allegations being made, the seriousness of the charges. We're going to go ahead and send this up, or recommend that this be sent up to the Superior Court, big boy court, where that child could then be treated as an adult. On the reverse, there are times where maybe the decision was made to start a matter in Superior Court, and then they will again review those facts and determine, you know what, this is actually more appropriate to send it back down to juvenile court, and they can send it back to us. But at the end of the day, we're always looking to make sure that we are following the law, because if we start getting emotions involved, then things can go left really, really fast. And I believe in treating everybody equally and applying the law fairly. Now, you mentioned too about school attendance, and we get that a lot. So I almost hesitate to tell the kids this, but the cutoff age is technically 16. If you're under the age of 16, it is mandatory that you attend school. At the point that you turn 16, it no longer becomes mandatory, but the key is you have to fill out paperwork acknowledging that you are looking to withdraw. Your parent has to sign. So it's not just a case of, oh, I turned 16, I'm not coming to school today. That's not how it goes. And obviously, the court's position is that every child needs to receive their education. So I will say, if you come in front of me and you're 16, and generally those kind of cases, it's a child who's had poor attendance issues. You generally don't have a kid that has good attendance, good grades, all of a sudden waking up one day and saying, I don't want to go to school anymore.
Right.
And so the young person that comes in front of me, they just turned 16. They're saying, I don't want to go to school. You can't make me go to school. I'm going to talk with them and hopefully get them to see why it's so important for them to get their education. And unless and until their parent has signed off on this paperwork, the law does require them to still attend school. And in most instances, these parents are not obviously going to sign off for their child to just stop their education. And we've actually, I'm happy to report, we've had some young people, 16, 17, who are like, oh, they come to court with the intention to say, oh, I'm not going to go to school anymore. And we've been able to talk with them and allow them to see what the benefits are of getting their education, whether it's in a traditional setting or whether it's getting their GED. And the court does have a GED program that we do over at Tubman.
Okay.
And we have a very, very high pass rate. We have great instructors. They work one-on-one with our kids. We have a morning session, and we also have an afternoon session. That way, if you're working, we can work around your schedule. But there's never a reason to not get your education.
Absolutely.
And we're going to make sure we find a way. And a lot of our young people, too, are reporting some of the reasons they don't like to go to school. And when we hear these things, we're like, okay, so maybe that GED would be a good option because it's going to be a smaller classroom size. Because we have some kids that report they have social anxiety. They have some kids that report bullying situations. So if we can pull you out of that environment and put you in a smaller setting, you can still receive your education. And because I don't believe that anything should stop you.
Right. Yeah. Now, is that something like, is that formally through DJJ, or is it informal if you have someone that is experiencing that, where they're 16 years of age and they just don't want to be in a school setting?
Well, I'm going to first try to find out, why don't you want to be in a school setting? Talk to me. Let me know. Because sometimes, I'm going to be honest, it's just, you just don't want to go to school. You got to get up like everybody else and go to school. Yes. Because if you're not going to school, what job are you going to get?
Exactly.
Because your job's going to expect you to show up on time for that job, or they're going to get rid of you. So we want them to see the importance of it. So if it's just a situation like that, that's not good enough for me. And then, like I said, we get into some of the kids who have significant social anxiety. Some of the kids are being bullied really, really badly. So we will obviously give them some tips for that, but unless and until we can resolve those issues, if we need to get them into a GED program, that's what we'll do. If we need to look at, in a lot of instances, the child may not even have like a plan in place with the school. And so we'll encourage them, go to the school, because maybe we can get like a bullying packet filed that will put something in writing, puts the school on notice that my child is having an issue with this child. I need the school to take some actions to keep them separated. So that's a good start if your issue is bullying. If the child is experiencing social anxiety, we also have counseling services that the court can provide. So maybe that would be something to help the child to work on why they have so much social anxiety, build some confidence in them, and be able to kind of get the two to work together, where you're in the counseling. We're encouraging you to go to school. As the counseling sessions are having more of an effect, we see some changes in your attitude towards going to school. So it's all encompassing. I mean, we try to find out, because there's just so many reasons. Another reason we're hearing that a lot of kids don't go to school, there's a lot of instability within their home lives, where maybe you don't know if you're going to be staying at your grandma's today, at your auntie's today, at a hotel, and that can be a lot for a kid. And if you're all over the place, and one day you're in this school zone, the next day you're in this school zone, then there's going to be some issues with that child not attending. There's not transportation all the time available.
Connectivity to other students and your friends and things like that, those social things that we were talking about.
Exactly. So we try to work on that. So once we can identify why is this child not going to school, that's what we're going to try to do, is address those. So when we have the housing instability, we're then reaching out to the school, because there is a law that is in effect that addresses when we have children who are experiencing housing instability. And there's laws in effect that the schools can provide like funds for transporting that child. And sometimes the parents aren't aware of that and they don't tell anybody. And so if you don't tell somebody, they don't know, and they won't be able to offer their services to help you. Obviously the bullying, we try to address that, the social anxiety. We try to just get to the heart of why these kids don't want to go to school.
And that brings us back to parent accountability as well. Having those conversations with your kids. If they're experiencing something in school, they need to talk to their kids about it, talk to their educators, talk to the administrators at the schools. Because a lot of times, if the parents aren't having that conversation, that child is holding that in.
Yes.
And they're going to skip school, whatever the case may be, or they're just staying home.
And that kind of brings in another kind of issue we're having too. If you, the parent or guardian, if you're not talking to your child, you better believe somebody is talking to your child, and it may not be the person that you want. And there's all sorts of, research out there that shows links between kids who are pulled into potentially gang activity, pulled into commercial sexual exploitation and or trafficking, and they're looking at some of those characteristics of those children. And a lot of times it's the kids that are not going to school, because no one has eyes on them. Like the social workers at school don't see them, the counselors don't see them. So there's no accountability, like what's going on with this child. But we're finding that those kids that are truant, that are kind of in the wind, don't have a lot of that parental support. These kids are getting pulled to somebody else who is going to find the time, who's going to make them feel special, who's going to make them all sorts of promises and offers of what they can do for them. And that's going to be enticing to some of these kids. And think about, if mom is working real hard, but mom can't afford to buy you those $200 tennis shoes, this person over here says, you do something for me and I can get you anything you want.
Right.
And so unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that. So we want our parents talking to their kids, to the point that, like I said, it's annoying your kids, but that's fine. I'd rather them be annoyed and be safe than not. And so you got to talk to your kids. You got to get in their business, because, again, there's all sorts of correlations between the kids who are just kind of isolated, not going to school, and what we're seeing is happening with those kids.
Well, I will say that this is way more encouraging than what I thought this conversation was going to be. Because when you listen to and you hear judges and juvenile court and stuff, it's the lock them up. But it's their resources, and you're trying to help, and you're trying to figure out the root of the problem. So that's like super encouraging to me, and I appreciate you coming on the show because, like I said, I didn't know where this was going to go. But even the parents, if they can just hear, especially from you who's a judge, saying, look, talk to your kids, talk to us. Don't be afraid to let people inside of where we are, because a lot of times we want to be isolated. You can't tell anybody this because they'll take you away, or you can't tell anybody this is going on. But how are they going to get the resources? Exactly. They're there, which is another encouraging thing. The resources are there. We just got to figure out how to get it to them. And I think that's one of the things that I'm going to try to work on personally, is to try to figure out how to get resources to people, because I'm tired of seeing just, you go and you see sometimes kids don't smile. I don't know if you've noticed that. They don't smile, or they don't. I mean, it's like, where are you? Where are you?
Always looking down.
Yes. And it's like, we have to do something. We have to figure something out. So it's really encouraging that the courts and Department of Juvenile Justice, that's the goal, and not just to, send them away until they're 21 or whatever it is. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm glad I was able to be here today to share some of this, because I think a lot of times it's just a lack of people not knowing, but our goal is always, always, always to try to help children. I never want to do something that's going to hurt a child. I want to do something that can help. That is what we're here to do. And sometimes in helping, the kids may not like the outcomes because it may require them to do stuff. And in some instances, it may even require them to go into detention. But everything that we're doing is for their benefit, is to help them. It's to ensure that we get them back on track.
And if we have, I know a lot of times we have people in the community that want to get involved. They want to be stakeholders. They want to know what they can do to help. Is there any way or anybody they can reach out to if they have services that they're willing to provide to the courts?
Absolutely. Well, honestly, they can go ahead and contact the court directly. I will say, too, that we have more on our dependency end, so those are the DFATS cases. We have what we call our Citizens Review Panel, and that is comprised of regular, everyday citizens, from the community, who come together, and they monthly will hear cases that involve children who are in the foster care system. And they will hear about the progress that is being made or that maybe is not being made in a case, and then they can make recommendations to the court as to how we should look to move forward. So that would be a great way. We encourage people to join our Citizens Review Panel, but also, like you said, if anybody is aware of various programs and services, we would love to be made aware of those, because the court, we do run or operate our own programs under the umbrella of our Thrive program, and those are run over at Tubman. But obviously, we have limitations, too. We can't provide services for every single child that's in need. And so we definitely would appreciate that. And so I would encourage them to contact the court so that maybe we can open up that conversation with them, see what kind of services they provide, see what kids that we have that would qualify. I will say we've worked with some other agencies throughout the community, and they have been very willing to work with us to provide some social activities for our kids. Sometimes it's totally free. Sometimes it's at a significant discount. But it's just great when you can have everybody come together. One quote that I really, really love to use, it's from Frederick Douglass, and he says, "It is much easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men."
Absolutely.
And I just feel like we got to do the work on the front end to make sure that we're building up strong children so that they're not ending up in big boy court. They're not, in the streets, but they're safe. They have the resources that they need, and that's what we're trying to do.
Well,
Thank you for
quote to end on. Well, thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it.